The Australian outback. In 1931, deep within the scorching, unforgiving red desert, explorer J.M. Mitchell marched toward a cluster of massive, silent craters. He expected a routine geological survey of natural sinkholes. His Aboriginal guide, however, absolutely refused to take another step. The guide spoke in terrified whispers about an ancient fire devil that had fallen from the blazing sun. Mitchell dismissed this as simple myth born from a brutal, isolated environment. He assumed he would find nothing but ordinary weathered rock under the dust. What he actually uncovered beneath the sand completely shattered modern scientific assumptions. What exactly did Mitchell pull from that scorching red sand? And why was the scientific community so quick to sweep it under the rug? The truth is often stranger, and far more closely guarded, than any myth. If you are as fascinated by these hidden chapters of history and suppressed archaeology as we are, please take a moment to like this video, share it with a fellow history buff, and subscribe to Echo Mysteries. Your comments and your support are the true lifeblood of this channel. It's your encouragement that gives us the motivation to keep digging through the sands of time, bypassing the mainstream narratives to bring these forgotten ancient secrets back to the surface. Let's uncover the past together. What do you think was hiding in those craters? Let me know in the comments below. The Aranda and Luritja people of the Northern Territory carried a chilling warning across the millennia. It was an oral tradition passed down through countless generations. It was a story of a day when the sky literally tore open. They spoke of a terrifying fire devil that broke away from the blazing sun. This fiery entity plummeted toward the earth with incomprehensible fury. It crashed into the arid plains and buried itself deep within the dirt. The impact ignited the world around it in a flash of blinding light. Everything in its immediate path was instantly vaporized. The indigenous elders strictly forbade anyone from approaching the deep scars left behind in the earth. They warned that the fire devil still lurked beneath the cracked ground. It was waiting. It was angry. It was toxic. The local tribes maintained an absolute taboo around these specific depressions in the harsh landscape. When rare, heavy rains fell across the unforgiving outback, water would naturally pool inside these massive earthen bowls. To a thirsty, exhausted traveler, it looked like a miraculous oasis. But the Aboriginal guides knew the deadly truth. They called it a vicious trap set by the devil. Anyone who dared to drink would be struck down by a mysterious iron sickness. Their internal organs would fail, their skin would turn pale, and they would die. This was the exact story J.M. Mitchell was told as he stood on the edge of the site in 1931. He looked into the fearful eyes of his guide. He saw genuine terror. He assumed it was just primitive superstition. He decided to dig anyway. His heavy shovels pierced the red dirt, expecting to hit the limestone bedrock. Instead, his metal tools struck something impossibly hard. It was not ordinary rock. It was dense, metallic, and foreign. It was completely foreign to the desert. So what could create a massive landscape anomaly like this? The earth slowly yielded pieces of twisted, melted metal. They were massive, jagged fragments of iron and nickel. Mitchell had not discovered a sinkhole. He had walked straight into the blast zone of a cosmic airburst. Modern geology would date this event to 4.700 years ago. A massive meteorite had screamed through the atmosphere. When it struck the Australian continent, the energy released was cataclysmic. The force caused rock to behave like liquid. The violent impact vaporized the primary mass. It threw tons of molten shrapnel across the surrounding area. It left behind a cluster of massive craters. The devastation was absolute. The obliteration was instantaneous. The geological data aligned with the myth. The fire devil falling from the sun was a blazing meteorite. But the revelation came from the poisoned water. The warning about iron sickness was a deadly scientific fact. The iron-nickel fragments scattered throughout the craters would slowly oxidize over the centuries. They leached high concentrations of heavy metals into any rainwater that gathered there. Drinking that water caused severe poisoning. The physical symptoms matched the ancient warnings exactly. The myth was actually a highly accurate survival manual. But here is where the story deepens. In 2014, detailed research published in the Smithsonian magazine confirmed the truth. The oral history of the Aboriginal people had perfectly preserved a terrifying cosmic event for nearly 5 millennia. Without a written language or modern instruments, they recorded an astronomical impact and its subsequent chemical hazards with precision. They understood the invisible toxicity of the soil. They tracked the downward trajectory of a celestial body. They passed this critical survival data down through hundreds of generations without losing a single vital detail. The story of the fire devil was never a fairy tale. It was a meticulously maintained scientific observation. The ancient people did not invent monsters out of thin air. They simply survived them. Conrara, Queensland. Today, the surrounding tropical savanna is a quiet, sun-baked expanse. It stretches peacefully across the harsh northern landscape. But the traditional owners of this land remember a vastly different reality. The Gugu Badan people hold a memory. They speak of an era when the earth itself violently broke open. Elders pass down nightmare-inducing accounts of cataclysm. They describe a time when the watercourses literally caught fire. The ground trembled violently beneath their ancestors' feet. A deafening roar swallowed the quiet valleys. Then came the incandescent rivers of liquid rock. It was not a localized brushfire. It was an apocalyptic flood of burning, unstoppable earth. The legends speak of choking black ash completely blotting out the daytime sun. The air turned into heat. The familiar, life-giving waterways boiled away into hissing clouds of toxic steam. The destruction was absolute. It was a terrifying inversion of natural law. Water turned to unquenchable fire. Solid ground turned to liquid terror. Everything they knew was consumed. The oral history did not just describe a random, chaotic nightmare. It meticulously mapped a highly specific path of total obliteration. The Gugu Badan stories detailed where burning rivers flowed. They remembered how the terrifying fire crawled down the ancient, dry riverbeds, violently swallowing the old, towering forests. It permanently choked the familiar, deep gorges with smoking rock. Generations whispered about valleys consumed by the black mass. They knew precisely which fertile hunting grounds were buried. For centuries, European researchers completely dismissed these vivid descriptions. They arrogantly categorized them as exaggerated mythological allegories, assuming it was just a poetic way to describe summer droughts. Or perhaps a memory of a severe lightning strike. But normal bushfires do not leave thousands of fused black lumps. Standard weather events do not turn deep riverbeds into hardened black stone. Something far more violent occurred in this valley. The indigenous stories were screaming a physical, undeniable truth. They just needed modern science to finally listen. Modern geology eventually caught up. Scientists recently arrived in the Birdkin region equipped with advanced radiometric dating technology. They began mapping the massive, ancient lava flows scarring the landscape, tracing jagged basalt miles back to its source. It led him to the Conrara volcano. By analyzing isotopic decay in rocks, they pinpointed the exact moment of eruption. The groundbreaking results were published in 2024. The violent explosion occurred exactly 7 millennia ago. The isotopic dating was flawless and irrefutable. The geological scar across the Queensland terrain was undeniably real. Thousands of tons of 1.20-degree molten rock flooded the region. It was a cataclysmic event of incomprehensible scale. But here is where the story deepens. Geologists overlaid high-tech satellite maps with ancient stories, showing terrifyingly precise correlation. The exact, twisting path of the hardened lava perfectly matched the destruction routes described by the Gugu Badan elders. The mythological rivers of fire were literal, flowing lava tubes. The ancient storytellers had accurately documented the complex fluid dynamics of a major volcanic eruption. They successfully memorized the precise topographical shifts of their devastated homeland. They transmitted this highly technical, devastating geological survey across 7,000 years of history. They did this without maps. They preserved the terrifying memory of the Conraro eruption with a level of fidelity that rivals modern scientific instruments. This was not a childish fairy tale about angry, vengeful spirits. It was a rigorous, verified, intergenerational survival record. The scarred landscape had been permanently burned into the collective memory. The rivers of fire were an absolute reality, and the original witnesses had simply never forgotten. Imagine standing on the bustling modern shoreline of Port Phillip Bay. You look out over the vast expanse of water separating the coastal suburbs of Melbourne. Dozens of white sailboats drift. Massive international cargo ships slowly navigate the main shipping channel. It is a massive, permanent marine environment that defines geography. It feels as ancient, solid, and unchangeable as the earth itself. But the oral traditions of the local Kulin nation tribes paint a shockingly different picture. Their ancient elders do not speak of a bay. They remember a vast, fertile, grassy plain extending all the way to the southern horizon. They describe their ancestors walking directly across the immense area. They set up permanent camps in the center of what is now deep, turbulent ocean. They hunted large mobs of kangaroos on dry, solid ground. They gathered native yams and hunted emus where luxury yachts currently drop anchor. Their stories describe a time when the ocean was just a distant rumor. The deadly saltwater was locked far away from their hunting grounds. The only entrance to the bay was a narrow, steep river gorge. Then, the Great Flood arrived. It was not a temporary storm surge that washed over the beach. It was an apocalyptic, permanent drowning of their entire known world. The sea rose relentlessly. It swallowed the hunting grounds yard by yard. It chased the indigenous tribes higher and higher into the surrounding hills. It never retreated. The water claimed the land. The modern bay you see today is actually a flooded graveyard of an ancient ecosystem. Historians treated these flood myths as universal, exaggerated fables. They assumed every ancient culture simply invented a great flood narrative to explain seasonal weather patterns. The idea that a massive, deep water bay was recently dry, walkable land seemed geologically impossible to early colonial settlers. The sheer volume of water required to create such a massive geographical shift was unimaginable. They brushed the stories aside. But the physical evidence was waiting silently at the very bottom of the sea. In 2018, groundbreaking research began, led by the University of the Sunshine Coast. Professor Patrick Nunn and his team sailed into Port Phillip Bay. They drove heavy, industrial drilling equipment deep into the dark ocean floor. They extracted long, cylindrical sediment cores. These dense mud cores act like a physical time machine for geologists, capturing distinct layers of biological history. The geologists meticulously analyzed the microscopic contents hidden within the compressed mud, expecting to find thousands of years of marine life. What they found instead completely rewrote the geographical history. Deep beneath the saltwater deposits, the sediment composition abruptly changed. Marine fossils vanished from the lower layers, replaced by the unmistakable biological signatures of terrestrial plants and tree roots. The deep core samples contained dry land flower pollen and ancient oxidized soil. The scientific data proved the stories accurate. The detailed geological timeline derived from the mud aligned perfectly with the violent end of the last ice age. Global temperatures had slowly begun to rise. Massive continental ice sheets rapidly melted and dumped fresh water into the oceans. This triggered a catastrophic, worldwide sea level rise, permanently altering the landscape and drowning the ancient, dry grassy plains. Around 7.20 years ago, the rising Southern Ocean finally breached the natural rocky barrier at the mouth of the modern bay. The saltwater violently rushed into the low-lying hunting plains. It was a localized apocalypse driven entirely by global climate shifts. The Kulin Nation ancestors had personally witnessed one of the most dramatic geographical transformations in human history. They watched the ocean literally consume their ancestral homeland. They encoded this traumatic geographical trauma into their strict oral traditions. They passed the terrifying memory of the dry plains down through hundreds of generations without distortion. The scientific validation of this local flood myth proved a profoundly important point. Indigenous oral histories are not simply cultural folklore. They are highly accurate, empirical observations of ancient paleoclimatology. The Aboriginal people accurately recorded a massive sea level rise, thousands of years before the invention of written text or scientific tools. The rising water is real. The flooded plains are real. The memory of the drowned world survived. How is this level of accuracy even possible? How can a human mind preserve a complex geological event for 7,000 years without a single written word? Modern society relies heavily on hard drives, cloud storage, and printed archives to maintain our collective history. We assume that unwritten memories naturally degrade over time like a child's game of telephone. We expect facts to quickly dissolve into vague rumors and eventually become unrecognizable fairy tales within just a few generations. We underestimate the extraordinary power of the human brain when it is pushed to its absolute limits. The Aboriginal cultures of Australia did not just tell stories around a campfire for simple entertainment. They engineered an incredibly sophisticated, highly rigid system of data storage. They turned the entire Australian landscape into a massive, living library. They call this immense mnemonic network the songlines. The songlines are invisible, complex pathways that crisscross the entire continent. They connect specific physical landmarks like rocks, waterholes, and mountain ranges. The ancient people physically anchored the critical survival data. They composed highly structured songs and rhythmic chants that described both the physical terrain and the historical events that occurred there. To navigate the harsh desert, a traveler had to perfectly sing the song of that specific route. If they forgot a verse or changed a word, they would literally become lost and die in the unforgiving outback. The accuracy of the song was a matter of immediate life and death. The oral tradition was never casual. It was a strict, highly regulated scientific discipline. The elders enforced absolute precision throughout the entire learning process. A young initiate could not arbitrarily change a character or an event just to make the story more exciting. The data had to remain pristine. But here is where the story deepens. The transfer of vital information. It was not a simple bedtime story whispered in the dark. It involved intense, multi-sensory ceremonial rituals for weeks. The elders utilized hypnotic chanting, complex rhythmic dancing, and intricate body painting to deeply encode the data. They intentionally linked the geographical facts with strong emotional triggers. This process bypasses the fragile short-term memory. It embeds the information deep within the long-term cognitive structures of the brain for permanent biological reflex. The story of the fire devil or the burning rivers was rehearsed repeatedly until it became permanent knowledge. The ancient myth was actually a brilliant mnemonic device designed to compress massive amounts of environmental data. The Aboriginal people successfully created the oldest, continuous, unbroken data transmission system in human history. They proved that the human mind, when disciplined, is far more durable than stone or paper. The landscape is the archive. The song is the hard drive. The memory is eternal. So how do you actually use this information in the real world? The next time you hear a story, do not just politely listen. Do not dismiss it as primitive fiction. You can actively decode the hidden history. You can become a geomythologist yourself. You just need to apply a rigorous analytical framework. Whenever someone claims these ancient Australian legends are completely fabricated, you can dismantle their argument instantly. But to do that, you must master the 3 strict rules of narrative excavation. Rule 1. Strip away the supernatural elements entirely. Ancient cultures simply lack the modern vocabulary of astrophysics and tectonic chemistry. They used the cultural language actively available to them. They explained incomprehensible devastation through the lens of local theology. You must actively look past the angry gods. You must deliberately ignore the divine punishments. Think back to the Aboriginal elders, warning their children about the fire devil from the sun. The devil is simply a narrative wrapper. It is a highly effective cultural container designed to preserve a terrifying physical fact. When you systematically strip away the demonic persona, the undeniable truth remains. You are left with a blazing metallic object falling from the sky. You are left with a massive impact crater. You are left with a highly accurate medical warning about toxic iron sickness. Rule 2. Isolate the core physical anomaly. Once you carefully remove the theological mythology, focus on the raw environmental description. What is actually happening to the Earth in the story? Look for specific, extreme changes in the basic natural elements. Does the myth explicitly describe normal watercourses turning into unquenchable fire? That is a highly specific, undeniable physical event. It perfectly isolates the fluid dynamics of a massive molten lava flow tearing through a dry riverbed. Does the story mention the daytime sky turning completely black with suffocating dust? That directly isolates a violent volcanic ash cloud. You are never looking for poetic metaphors here. You are extracting the literal, physical data points buried deep within the oral tradition. Rule 3. Anchor the timeline to the shifting Earth. Take those isolated physical data points and place them onto a geological map. Our planet is a highly dynamic, ever-changing physical system. It always leaves permanent physical scars. If a local Victorian tribe describes walking across a vast, dry plain that is now a deep ocean bay, listen to them. They are handing you a precise paleoclimatic record. They are describing the catastrophic global sea level rise at the end of the Ice Age. They are describing the exact, violent formation of Port Phillip Bay. You must match their physical description to known glacial melting patterns. You must match the blazing river to the known radiometric dating of local Conrara basalt. The next time you travel through the vast outback, change your perspective. Do not just blindly admire the beautiful scenery of a national park. Analyze the deep, violent scars in the earth. Apply this rigorous framework to the ancient voices. You will realize the myths were never lies. Across this immense, ancient continent, the evidence is undeniable. The Australian landscape is not just a collection of weathered rocks and dry plains. It is a massive, geological library built from fire, water, and cosmic impacts. But more importantly, the indigenous people were its faithful librarians. They did not invent fairy tales to entertain themselves in the dark. They survived the absolute worst catastrophes the planet could throw at them. They witnessed the sky falling. They watched the earth burn. They saw the ocean swallow their homes. And they remembered. They encoded their trauma into songs and passed it down through unimaginable stretches of time. Their oral history is a brilliant, highly accurate system of scientific observation. It forces us to completely rethink everything we assume about primitive cultures. The myths are real. The scars are real. The memory is real. So look at the myths in your own culture. What forgotten apocalypse are they trying to tell you about?